Why do NES colors look so different in emulators? I'm going to assume that older TVs are shit. That's going to be my logic. Maybe there's something different, but that's gonna be where I come from with this. Let's see if I'm wrong. Either old TVs are shit, or like the fucking what's the cable called? I'm forgetting what it's called. The colored cables. Actually, what did the NES use for video connection? Did it use not fucking NTSC? What did the NES use for video output? I never had an NES. Composite is what I was thinking of. Tube, yes. Cathode ray tube. I don't think it used a cathode ray tube. NES video output. They used cables. That is true. They used RF. Okay. Or you did have the option of composite. Okay. Composite was there. But I don't know how many TVs at the time supported that. So it's kind of like when the PS3 came out. When I bought a PS3, my TV didn't have HDMI. I still had a TV that only had composite. I guess, yeah, composite, or because there's another one, isn't there? Component, yeah. Yeah, you got component and composite, which always confused me. RF is the GOAT, so why would you want to use composite? I don't know. That's a good question. Anyway, the video. Why do NES colors look so different in emulators?
Call me a poser, but the first time I ever played Super Mario Bros. Was in an emulator.
Have I ever actually played the first Super Mario Bros.? I actually don't think I have.
I distinctly remember its bright, vibrant, saturated colors. There was a playfulness to it. Just looking at it, it felt warm and inviting.
Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt. Right, there was a combo. Yeah, there was a combo cartridge. Yeah, okay.
I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s when we were just learning how to share things over the nascent internet. And as I started researching some of my new favorite 8-bit
oh man, I miss this era of YouTube.
Nintendo games, I noticed something strange. Their Super Mario Bros. Didn't look like mine. The browns were browner, the blues were grayer.
Granted, this is also capture of a really old capture as well, so that would also make it worse.
Everything just looked a little off. I didn't really know what to make of it. I mean, the early internet was full of low-quality images and videos.
Yeah.
Was this just another instance of that? As I got more into retro gaming and was this just...
There's a video from 2006. Here's a question. When did speedrunning... Maybe someone has a video on this because someone can find a video on this. When did speedrunning, like, become a thing? Because presumably it was like an early internet thing, an early video sharing thing. But I have no idea when speedrunning actually started. Like, obviously people have always tried to finish a game fast. But, like, when speedrunning became like an actual defined thing, I have no idea.
Just another instance of that? As I got more into retro gaming and learned more about the disparities between original hardware and emulators, I started to notice a trend. Footage from original hardware looked more like those pictures I saw and less like the emulators I grew up with. I started to assume those vibrant colors from my youth were just another emulator inaccuracy to turn my nose up at. The version on the Wii Virtual Console, often considered highly accurate, seemed to back that up. At the very least, it wasn't the colors I grew up with. But then things got even more confusing. Super Mario Maker famously had a mode that replicated the first Super Mario Bros. However, the colors here looked different again. Did Nintendo make a mistake? Were they just taking artistic license, cleaning up the muted colors for our modern sensibilities?
Speed Demo's archive is from 1998, so at least that.
But But then looking at the game on the NES Classic, all of these are ostensibly supposed to be the same game.
I think... On which situation are we talking about? Sorry, you gotta be more specific than that. I have a feeling Nintendo doesn't actually... because it was made for older TVs that were a lot worse producing color, and also for older video signals, I have a feeling that Nintendo doesn't know what this definitively should look like. Obviously, you'd have like paper creation. You'd obviously have your like color sheets, but I don't know if the color sheets were created to deal with issues with older TVs and older like arcade cabinets, or if they were the intended colors. I'm not sure.
So why do they look so different? Which one is correct? Well, you may be surprised to hear the answer is none of them.
Yeah, okay.
It turns out there is no definitive consensus for exactly how the NES should look. But how is that possible? Why can't the NES make up its mind and say, this is the color I'm trying to make? Well, with newer game systems, the image is usually generated digitally in RGB by some kind of GPU, which is then sent to an encoder chip that converts the image into the various TV standards like composite and S-video. But this isn't how the NES works. Its graphics chip, known as the Picture Processing Unit, actually generates NTSC composite video directly, rather than using
I see. Okay.
RGB values. Developers had 6 bits to define illuminance and chrominance.
Okay. So this is a color space conversion issue, and because composite is so different from RGB, you don't actually have a... Thank you for the Prime, appreciate it. You don't actually have a direct conversion that is correct, I guess.
Effectively mapping onto NTSC
I played on a Famicom or bootleg NES.
NTSC we've done videos design goals, low cost.
We did a video on, I think, a Chinese and maybe a Russian NES. We definitely did one on a Chinese NES. I know that for sure. I feel like a Russian NES was another one as well.
Efficient on bandwidth.
Maybe it was an Indian NES. Doesn't matter. Not important right now.
Backwards compatible with black and white TVs. Perfect color reproduction. C 1:1. The problem is NTSC had many design goals. Low cost, efficient on bandwidth, backwards compatible with black and white TVs.
Oh, okay.
Perfect color reproduction? Not really one of them. While NTSC worked well in the lab, in practice it was notoriously prone to errors in color transmission. Anything from a TV's circuitry to long transmission distances to the signal bouncing off buildings and mount sites could cause the hue to shift, infamously making human skin tones take on more of a purple hue. These tendencies earned NTSC derisive nicknames like never twice the same color or no true skin color. But while these may sound like oversights, the NTSC designers knew from the beginning that it was sensitive to transmission errors. They intentionally allowed fairly wide tolerances in color accuracy to help keep costs and bandwidth low. If one TV's color didn't quite line up with another, which they often didn't just because they used different circuitry, it wasn't considered a big deal as long as it was still in the acceptable range.
So you could very well have played, and I guess it'd be harder to see with the lower quality TVs, but you could have very well played your NES and then an NES at a friend's house, and it would have looked entirely different even in the exact same gameplay.
And finally, if the hue ever seemed really off, most NTSC TVs were equipped with a tint control allowing you to correct it by eye. All this is to say that in practice, NTSC color varied a lot. Even with an identical signal, it was rare for any two TVs to produce exactly the same image due to both differences in their internal circuitry and how they were adjusted by the viewer. It's easy to criticize NTSC for its shortcomings, and to be clear, there are a lot of them, but considering this was 1950 and they had to squeeze a full color image into the existing black and white broadcast, it was undoubtedly an engineering miracle for the time. How were they supposed to know that one day a video game console would base its entire color system on it? The NES, being directly connected to the TV, does not suffer from the same volatile color shifts as broadcast television.
Right.
But again, even with exactly the same signal, two TVs rarely looked the same due to how NTSC was implemented, and the NES feed was no exception. As I said, the NES defines all of its colors.
I guess it also depends on how the individual TVs decide to handle these values.
As NTSC values. And while there are established algorithms for converting NTSC to RGB, that doesn't mean it'll look like your home TV from the 80s, or for that matter, the TV that the developers were designing on. All of us were beholden to whatever colors our TV gave us, and that's really the crux of the issue. Being scientifically correct with the NES is not the same thing as being true to the artist's vision.
God, I can only imagine the fucking nightmare of, like, developing games. Obviously, like, let alone the programming side, developing the art for a game at this point. I assume there were obviously broadcast, like, quality production displays, right? Like, for movie creation, stuff like that. As we started moving to a digital age, there were obviously TVs that were, like you have today, with, like, pro art displays, where they are specifically calibrated to certain color spaces. But I would imagine that was probably a thing then as well, just less common. I wonder if they actually care that much about it that much. Well, you see movies where they are very specifically colored in a certain way, so presumably, or maybe they, like, base it off of common movie projectors for movies. I have no idea.
Or the reason a lot of people play these games, nostalgia. If you really wanted to see exactly the same colors that the original artists were seeing, you'd have to know exactly what TV they were using, know where their tint control was set, track one down, assume the color circuitry didn't differ between each unit manufactured, and that it hadn't drifted at all in the last 40 years. It's not exactly practical, is what I'm saying.
Right.
You might be wondering, how does this all work with PAL, the European television format? PAL, being about
Oh, right. Yeah, that also exists.
10 years newer, tried to improve on the notorious color issues of NTSC, and for the most part, it did produce a much more consistent picture that eliminated the need for a tint control.
Wait, what was Japan?
And for the most being about, you might be wondering,
where's Japan? Okay.
How does this all work with PAL, the European television format? PAL being about 10 years newer.
Oh, there was a variant. There was a variant of NTSC. Of course there was. Why wouldn't there be?
Tried to improve on the notorious color issues of NTSC, and for the most part, it did produce a much more consistent picture that eliminated the need for a tint control. That means, in theory, yes, PAL NESs were much more consistent between each TV. The problem is the NES was very much designed around NTSC.
Yeah, like you can say, oh, this is... Well, the NES might have been designed around NTSC, but there obviously was the, like, Australian variant of it. So the Australian variant of it may have been more consistent, but that doesn't mean it was consistent with what they intended from NTSC.
PAL was only bolted on later to bring it to Europe, at which point Nintendo realized they couldn't quite achieve the same palette there. So games developed with NTSC monitors, which happened to be the vast majority of them, all ended up looking a little off. Just because it's consistent doesn't mean it's consistently right. Coupled with running 16% slower due to PAL being 50Hz instead of 60, PAL players almost universally.
I remember when I played Sonic Heroes, in the, like, opening of that game, it gets you to select 50Hz or 60Hz. I didn't know the difference, so I picked the wrong one, and that just removed the color channel. So the game was just in black and white. Apparently that's a thing that can happen.
Got the worst versions of NES games. So basically, NES color is a mess. Developers could choose what they thought looked best, but only had so much control over how it would be received.
They obviously had paper colors though, right? And they would have had color reference sheets they designed things around. So I hope he brings that up, because it's not like the artists are just, like, creating things in a vacuum, right? Like, they have defined colors they want to work with, even if those are not the colors that the game is going to necessarily be displayed at. So would those be the correct colors then?
I almost wonder how frustrating this was for them. You could choose a brilliantly vibrant blue, only for players to see a dull purple instead. It's like trying to plot points on a color wheel, except no one can quite agree where the wheel even is. But this issue really came into focus when it came time to develop emulators. If everyone grew up with a slightly different color palette, how do you agree on which one to use?
Right.
Well, the answer is, you don't. Today there are dozens, if not hundreds of NES palettes out there to choose from. And virtually all major emulators allow you to override whatever they default to. Some of them used guesswork, some of them used algorithms, some of them sampled color off their own childhood TV. None of these are objectively right or wrong. They're just different opinions on how NES games should look. It's all we have given the variability of NTSC. Some people have spent years trying to perfect the ultimate palette, and even then people can't agree whether it's the best one or not. Ultimately, there is no consensus. It's just whatever looks right to you. Yeah, it all comes back to adjusting the tint control. And while it is a shame that there's no real way to achieve exactly what the original developers were going for, the fact is they almost certainly designed for that reality. Artists would have looked at the game on multiple different monitors, and if anything looked egregiously wrong, they would have corrected it. In that sense, you could argue no TV got it wrong. And in a way, this is all part of the charm of the NES. The hardware was so primitive, so...
Okay, he's not going to bring it up. Oh, I do kind of wish he brought it up. The artists obviously would have had color reference sheets. So there was, like, when they were doing their paper designs, there obviously would have been some defined color. I do wish he brought this up. It's such a massive oversight for this video. I was waiting the entire time for this to be mentioned.
Much of it was hacks built on top of hacks, but those brilliant developers were able to make unforgettable experiences with it even so. It's the reason we're still talking about the NES over 40 years later. So really, as long as it looks good to you, that's all that matters. The developers are probably just happy we're still playing it all.
Well, not Nintendo.
Here's a question. If the NES produces nothing but composite video, how did people mod it to get a crystal clear RGB, or for that matter, HDMI feed out of it? Well, it's actually pretty interesting, and if you want to hear all about it, click the link on the screen to see part 2. Of course, special thanks to my...
On that note, I actually did say, there's a Game Boy capture card, and the way the Game Boy capture card works is it is literally just a Game Boy emulator that then takes the emulated gameplay and then feeds it out through USB. So it's a board you plug into the game slot, you plug the game into. Like, you're playing regularly on the Game Boy, it just passes everything through, but it also emulates every single machine code as well, which I think is kind of neat. My gamer classmates just asked for a multi-standard TV from their parents. Multi-standard TV. What?
Patrons and members scrolling on the screen right now for making these videos possible. If you'd like to get early access to videos just like this one, as well as at least one bonus video every month, sign up using the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.
That was a good video. I always like Matt KC. It's always fun stuff. He always got some, you know, when he's not talking about, when he's not talking about Lego. You know. Oh, man. That was good. I like that.